Hi, Dr. Bo here again. The other concept that comes along with, moving the muscle, getting the vertebrae to go home so the muscle can relax and stop giving you a tight shoulder or a tight back or whatever, because it's finally made itself by the chiropractor. He takes the bone's out of place, that causes the muscles to be tight. He puts the vertebrae back in place and now the muscles can relax because the vertebrae is home. Is when the vertebrae is out of place or subluxated, that puts a mechanical stress on the joint, and the body has a long-term goal. If it can't pull that bone back in place with the muscle, you can see this one's going to have more weight on it over here, and this is going to be under stress, leaning to the side like that. So if the person's walking through life like that, that's going to cause calcium deposits to deal with the stress on the long term. So the muscles might get tight on the short term, but on the long term, the body says, okay, we got to do something here with the design here. It's supposed to be straight, but he fell off the swing when he was 5 and bent his head to the side, and he hasn't done anything to correct that. That's what the chiropractor would do. That's why we see children, because when they fall off the swings and so forth, the little vertebrae get kinked and out of place, and the chiropractor figures out how to put that all back straight, and then the stresses are gone. But if it doesn't, like most of us when we were kids years ago, we didn't have chiropractors. So the body now has to deal with that. So you can see it makes this muscle over here larger and makes the bone, it says, okay, the muscle is large, but let's go ahead and put more calcium in here, and let's try to modify this joint and make it stronger calcium-wise. And that's called arthritis, or unfortunately, a term called DJD, or degenerative joint disease, which is, there's no disease there at all. There's just, if I tap on this skin here, this bone, and I do that for a year, you're gonna see a white haze there, right? We talked about this before. If you dig ditches, you get calcium in your skin called calluses. Well, the same thing happens. That's really what arthritis is. Arth means joint, itis means inflammation. The body has to deal with that on the long term. So it goes ahead and puts calcium in there, trying to make it structurally bigger to deal with the mechanical stress and take the load off the muscles, since they can't hold forever, and they do enlarge and modify. But if you put calcium in there and toughen the joint up and stop the movement of it and fuse it a little bit, then the muscle can back down and you'll feel better, because you don't have that muscle tension all the time, which is more acute and short-termed. But by putting calcium in there, and they call that a disease. It's not a disease, it's a normal modification to stress. The body has a system of cells called chiroblasts that build bone, and osteoclasts and osteoblasts. Osteoblasts build bone, osteoclasts, and they go around like scrubbing bubbles. The osteoclasts eating the bone away, and the osteoblasts depositing the calcium down there and modifying the way the bone is shaped. And you can even see on this model spine that these bumps up here are all put on here from injuries when this person was alive, and that made this bump bigger because the tendon was attached there or whatever, and it was tugging and tugging. So the body put some more calcium in there. And of course, you've seen the description of the progression of this, when you have the good-looking vertebrae and then the next one, and then the body says, you know what, take that disc out of there and let's put some calcium in there. And it's actually modifying it into a different vertebrae. It says, we can't get through life like this. He's all bent sideways. To make it more easily handled, we go ahead and put more calcium in there, take the suspension out of there. It's like a car. It's got a shock absorber and a spring. The spring holds the weight, and the shock absorber keeps it from going boing, 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 boing. So the body has the same type systems of suspension, and it modifies it and says, let's make it one big hunk of calcium and get rid of the shock absorber in there and make it one big structural pipe and fuse it together. That's not a disease, even though it might even say degenerative joint disease. There's no such thing. There's no, I caught degenerative joint disease the other day. It doesn't happen that way. It seems like it is, and we hear that word DJD, it's not a disease. It's a normal adaptation. And I sometimes think it's the body's making these vertebrae look like other vertebrae that we have in the spine that are handling non-suspension joints. It doesn't need the spring part of it, which is what the disc is. This is a good looking disc. You can see the way the discs are made. You can see the annular rings. In my mind, I think there's like 7 onion type annular rings, and this nucleus, this hard thing in the center, is trying to make its way. When you twist it and tilt it to the side, it starts to the side, and this nucleus pulposus part, tries to start busting through these rings. And I'm going to have to get one of those games I had when I was a kid with a little marble in the middle, and you tilted it and you tried to get the marble to come through and over here and over there. And that's what the disc does. It makes its way zigzagging through about 7 layers. And sometimes I even think the person has about 7 injuries before that disc is not coming back anymore. And now it's the vertebrae closes down. Well, let me show you what happens when the vertebrae closes down. Then the hole the nerve goes through gets smaller. It's like 2 half holes, half a hole above, half a hole below. And as that disc goes away, that hole gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and the poor little nerve can't get out of there without being pinched by that vertebrae. And that's what we try to do. And you can also see, let me go back like 10 years and get one that's in better shape. And I want you to see what happens when you turn a vertebrae. This is important. Look at the hole that's called the intervertebral, which means between the vertebrae, foramina, which means hole. So there's the hole. Can you see it? And if I turn the vertebrae out of alignment, do you see how the nerve got pinched? So when you twist the hole, it makes the hole narrower. So there's 2 half holes, one above and one below, and that's compromising that hole for that nerve to make it to the kidney or make it to the liver. Because what does the liver and the kidney need? They need their signals from mother ship up above in the brain to know how to handle the physiology of the body. And that comes down either through the brainstem down. You have upper nerves, you have lower nerves, and they junction usually right around that hole. The nerves junction, like the motor nerve to my hand, will junction right, have a synapse. It's called a synapse, where the 2 wires come together, and it jumps this synapse chemically. So they call it electrochemical. So it's electrical along the nerve, and then it gets to the end of the nerve, and they have a synapse, and it jumps over using a chemical, acetylcholine, and it releases this chemical that goes across the gap, the synapse, and then it picks up again over here and goes electrical again down to the organ. So we call it electrochemical conduction of the nerve impulse. You'll hear that term, and you go, where's the electrical chemical coming from? Well, it's electrical along the nerve and chemical at the synapse. Not usually for the nerves in the spine, it's right around inside of that hole. So that's why we want to keep this, and that's what a chiropractor does. He lines up these vertebrae to make that hole as big as we can get it, not just for the moment, but for the long term, not irritating this disc, which keeps that hole. Can you see how the disc goes apart and makes the hole bigger? That's cool to know that. I hope you can see that. This is a vertebrae in the back, and you just gotta keep it in line to keep the hole as big as we can and keep the pressure off the disc so it stays filled with fluid. And that's why you are taller in the morning. As the day goes by, you lose a little bit of your height, and that gets worse as you get older. And this disc has stuff called glucose aminoglycan, which is the name of the substance, which is hydrophilic. It likes the water, and it basically at nighttime while you're sleeping, it sucks the water inside the disc, and that's why in the morning you're taller. It also means that if you have any pinching nerves in the morning, this is a good point to remember, that's why you hurt more in the morning, because you're filled with fluid, and that fills up the disc and fills up the space where the nerve comes out of. That's why I tell people, don't do a lot of stretching right out of bed. Don't get out of bed and go to the yoga class. I know you'd like to go to the yoga class first thing because you're all full of fluid, and those holes are pinched up with fluid, and you want to wait a couple hours before you do your roller. I never do your dental roll or your shaping tools in the morning. You can do some rolling, because you can see Brenda's rollers back there, and you want to do those rollers You can do those early in the morning, but no twisting, of course, because when you twist, and you know I'm against cracking the vertebrae or twisting it, can you see how here we have the hole open, and now we twist, pinched, and I better stop. Like and subscribe. Thank you.